You ready for this? Dean asked as he pushed the trunk shut and picked up his machete. Cass nodded. Yes, let's go. The large warehouse that stood before them was old and abandoned, the perfect housing for a nest of vampires. They entered cautiously, careful not to make any noise so as not to alert the vamps to their presence. Dean gestured for Cass to go one way while he went the other, and with that, they split. Dean treaded carefully, gently setting his feet on the ground around the broken glass that littered the dirty floor. Soon he came upon the room that the vampires were using as their sleeping quarters. Across the room, Dean saw that Cass had made it to the other side, and he nodded at him. Cass nodded back, and together they sprung to action. Dean reached for the closest vamp, pulling him up from his makeshift bed onto the floor, and sending his machete flying toward his head. The vampire hardly had a moment to realize what was happening before he was dead, and Dean was moving on. He and Cass had managed to kill 2 vampires each before the whole nest was awake and clawing at them. It only took Dean a moment to realize that there were too many of them. He began to back away, swinging in every direction and sometimes catching the head of a vampire. "Cass!" Dean shouted. "Cass, we've got to go!" Dean found himself pushed up against a wall, and his machete was grappled from his hands until it fell to the floor with a clatter. Hands grabbed at him, and Dean shoved back, somehow managing to free himself long enough to pull the gun from his belt. He aimed and fired, sending the vamp after vamp to the ground with bullets made of dead man's blood. "Cass!" Dean shouted again as he scrambled to his feet. "Dean!" Cass's answering shout made Dean turn to look at the circle of vampires that was surrounding the angel. Cass's machete was discarded a good 10 feet from him, and so he held his angel blade at the ready, swiping at any vamp that dared to get close. Dean began to shoot. A few of the vampires broke away from Cass and came towards Dean, but others took their chance and swarmed closer around Castiel. Dean dropped the ones that charged at him, and then rushed to Cass's aid. 4 more shots made the last of the vamps crumble to the floor. "Come on," Dean said as he began to make his way towards the door. Dean spun around, instantly worried in time to see Cass fall backwards. "Cass!" Dean ran towards him and fell down beside him. "Cass, what happened? Talk to me, buddy." "Vamp," Cass mumbled. "Stabbed me." Dean pulled aside Cass's trench coat to reveal a wound that was already pluming with blood. He pushed down the fear and worry that was beginning to tumble around in his stomach and heaved Cass into a sitting position. "Come on, we've got to go before the dead man's blood wears off." Cass shook his head. "No, I won't make it." "Don't talk like that, Cass. You'll make it," Dean snapped. "You can heal yourself, can't you?" Again, Cass shook his head. "It's too deep." "All right, well, let's get to the Impala. I'll patch you up. You'll be good as new," Dean said. His voice almost shook, but he forced it to stay level. "Dean, just go." Cass grunted over a cough that spewed blood onto Dean's shirt. "No, I'm not leaving you," Dean replied firmly. Gathering all his strength, he pulled Cass to his feet, earning a groan of pain from the angel, and began to half carry, half drag him towards the door. He could hear the sound of the vampires beginning to stir, and he knew they only had a minute at most to get out of the warehouse before they became vampire chow. "Come on, you're going to be fine. Come on," Dean encouraged Cass as they pushed their way outside. Cass faltered in Dean's arms and began to sink back towards the ground, but Dean caught him and did the only thing he could think of to do. He bent, pulled Cass's legs out from under him, and began to carry him bridle-style towards the car. As heavy as Cass was, the fear of the vampires catching up to them propelled him forward, and before he knew it, they were at the Impala's back door. Dean set Cass down, pulled open the door, and gently laid out the angel in the back seat. Dean was about to get the first aid kit from the trunk, but the sound of the warehouse doors opening made him freeze. "Dean, you have to drive," Cass said. His voice was hoarse and clouded with blood. Knowing he couldn't argue, Dean slipped into the driver's seat and started the engine, sending the Impala screeching out of the warehouse parking lot. "Just hang on, Cass. I'm going to get you help," Dean said as he fought the panic that was causing his heart to pound in his chest. "No, Dean." Dean glanced in the rearview mirror and saw that Cass's eyes were beginning to slide shut. No, Cass, you've got to stay awake. Do you hear me? Stay awake." Cass's head lolled limply to the side, and Dean cursed loudly. He pulled over and slammed on the brakes, quickly rushing from his seat to get to Cass. His hands wrapped around Cass's trench coat and pulled him onto the ground. Cass's upper body was sprawled across Dean's lap, and Dean's hands were hooked under Cass's armpits. He placed the palm of his hand over the wound and pressed, trying his hardest to keep the blood in. He needed that first aid kit. "Cass, I'm getting the first aid kit, okay? Just stay with me. Stay awake." Cass's breathing was beginning to slow and become labored as Dean braced himself to stand, but Cass's voice stopped him. "No, Dean," he mumbled. Blood trickled from his mouth, and his blue eyes fluttered open to lock with Dean's. Dean gaped at him. "What?" "No," Cass repeated. Dean shook his head. No, I have to. I have to." He made to get up again, but Cass's hand closed over the one that was pressing against his wound. "It's no use." Unable to hold them back now, tears began to spring into Dean's eyes, and he shook his head and bent to press his forehead against Cass's. "Cass, please," he begged in a whisper. "Please just stay with me." Cass tried to smile, but the small movement caused him to cough, and Dean felt the warm spread of fresh blood coat his fingers because of it. "Dean," Dean raised his head, meeting Cass's upside-down gaze. Cass, you have to get away. What? No, I told you, I'm not leaving you, Dean replied. No, Dean. Wings, Cass murmured. What? Dean asked in confusion. Wings, Cass repeated. Cass, you're not making any sense. Stop talking. Let me call Sam. We'll figure this out. With much effort, Cass shook his head. No, Cass, please. Dean begged over his tears, voice breaking. Dean, shh, I said don't talk. Don't talk. Dean, I love you, Cass gasped out. A sad smile flashed across Dean's face. I know, he replied shakily through his tears. He choked on his next words as his hands curled into Cass's blood-soaked shirt. I know. I love you too, he whispered. The corners of Cass's mouth twitched in a small smile, and then white light began to shine through his eyes, and a scream ripped through Cass's mouth. The bang that announced Cass's death brought with it a searing pain that burned through Dean's forearms, scraping away the sleeves of his shirt with flames of fire until it touched the skin underneath. It lasted no more than a second or two, but it hurt enough for him to almost pull away from Cass, but he didn't. He stayed clutching the angel to his chest and rocking him gently. Tears fell rapidly from his eyes, dampening his cheeks and causing his breath to leave him. Cass, he whispered in a broken sob. It wasn't until Dean forced himself to stand up that he saw the marks. Where his shirt had been burned away, a pattern of black feathers could be seen. Dean had no more tears left to cry, but his whole body began to shake and he sank to his knees, bending his head over Cass's body, scorched arms resting on his thighs, defeat clinging to his shoulders, sadness silhouetting him in darkness. Dean knew what the feathers on his arms meant. He had seen it many times before, the undeniable symbol that tended to paint the ground whenever an angel died. Cass had tried to warn him, had tried to get him to move, but Dean hadn't listened, and so now, Cass's wings were etched into his skin, a constant reminder of his failure and the loss of his best friend, whom he loved more than words could express. They were the mark of a fallen angel, his fallen angel, and Dean would wear them for the rest of his life.